Cool, John. Pleasure to see you as always. We are joined today by John Cole, who is one of the founders of Ezoic. And John, you've had an interesting and checkered past on the high seas as well as high ad tech. Could you maybe just give, for the benefit of our millions of viewers, just a brief sort of overview of your journey through ad tech and how you kind of arrived at Ezoic and what it is that you guys do?
Yeah, sure. So I was in the Royal Navy for 8 years after I left school and went straight in as a navigating officer, which it took me off to sea for about, like I said, 8 years, pretty much all the time being away. And when I came ashore, I did a couple of property projects. So I did a house up in France, one in Canada, and then had kids and really just got into online in, I think it was around about 99, when I was working with a very old and dear friend of mine, Justin Smith, to get a company going called Youth Media. And we put ads inside university computer networks before people had fast internet access. People would go to libraries at universities and get online. So we sold desktop hyperlinks. That's how long I've been in online, and screensavers and posters, and so I did that for a bit, and then when it got into the sort of ad network side of the industry, which is basically the aggregation of publishers and taking their inventory and selling it into agency deals. So that was called Media Run, and we ended up selling that business to a large ad network called Ad Knowledge, which is how you and I know each other. And then after Ad Knowledge, where I ran all of their European operations, and we worked on virtual currency sales together. Fantastic business at the time. Learned a hell of a lot. I got a call from Dwayne telling me that he was working on a new project and would I be interested. And he said, we're buying websites and we can increase the value of the ad earnings by about 50 to 100%. Are you interested in having a look at it? And I said, yes, I definitely am. So I started investing my own money. And you said at the beginning that I was a founder of Ezoic. Well, I guess I came in at the founding moment, but it was like an allied business. So I had my own money separate from the business, which I was investing. And then eventually we just thought, well, let's combine everything. And we raised some venture capital money. So we really started out by being publishers first. And we would go and acquire a content business. And the technology that Dwayne and the team were building was designed to make more money out of the site and therefore give us a really good return on our money. So we were able to buy a site for $100,000 and get that money back within 2 years. So mostly, I think on aggregate it was about 18 months. So really great investment business. And then we decided to open that up as a software product. And that's how we really got going. So now Ezoic is, I think I'm right in saying, Google's largest certified publishing partner. And, I think we have, it's about 170 staff. We have over 10,000 sites. We get about 400 to 500 sites sign up a day.
Wow.
And what it is a platform for publishers to access technology, machine learning technology, which makes things easier for you being a publisher. So number one, making more money. Number two, balancing user experience and ad revenue. And then number three, other things like content writing and privacy and those kind of things. So all the stuff that's quite hard to do if you're an independent publisher, Ezoic takes care of it all. You can sort of think of it as like a sort of super platform for any kind of CMS. So if you've got WordPress, most WordPress publishers have 60 plugins. all of these different plugins will be working, sometimes opposing each other in terms of, you know, whatever your goals are. And because Ezoic is server-side, we're able to unpick what works and what doesn't. And our system really is trying to improve things like time on site, page views per visit, bounce rate, scroll rate, or lower bounce rate, I should say, and also make money from ads. So typically we work with publishers who have been using Ad Exchange or Ad Manager themselves or AdSense, and they plug in Ezoic, and then they basically make 50% more money.
Wow.
So that's still the margin.
Did I hear that right? Is that, do you say 400 to 500 publishers a day?
Yeah. Now, that is quite surprising, isn't it? We can't take it. We can't take all of them, and that's one of the things that we're at now, is this sort of scale problem, which is a great problem to solve. But as you know, as a business grows, you know, you've got the very, very beginning stage of any business. That's the hardest stage. It's you know, people talk about the flywheel effect, don't they? Where you sort of put in tons of effort, it just moves a little bit, and then a little bit more and a little bit more, and eventually it starts to turn on its own with less effort. And we're sort of at that stage now where the market is moving towards us as much as we are building products to go to the market. So we're lucky in that respect, but then we've got to make it so it can scale. So, I mean, that's one of the great things about business, isn't it? Is this sort of never-ending problem-solving routine. And as you get bigger, I think the biggest, or certainly in my career, the hardest thing that I've been through is this move from sort of 50 people to, you know, 150.
Yeah.
And I've heard from people that that's really where the rubber meets the road, because then you've got management problems, you've got the issues of middle management, you've got issues of being too detached from your own customers. Whereas when you're in a small team, you can keep your finger on the pulse. So, yeah. Long answer to a short question, Zach. Sorry about that.
No. It's a kind of creative endeavor, isn't it? And the canvas just gets bigger. That's kind of it. So for you, adding value to publishers, like you said, sort of reducing bounce rate, helping them earn more revenue, tying together these kind of disparate modular sort of plugins maybe that they have if they're using WordPress. What would you say generally? I mean, it sounds as though it's pretty healthy, right? That the health of the publisher landscape at the moment, is it healthy? Are people still setting up sites, still creating content, still producing, you know, their own content in it, you know, rather than say, you know, one thinks of a lot of content being sort of within a walled garden of Facebook and so on.
And I think
sites and
I do. I think it's a shame where you have content producers who then end up in these walled gardens, and that they can't. It's not easy to share outside of that area. I love how we use these industry terms like walled garden. It's kind of funny, isn't it? I don't even think about it anymore, but I do remember when it first came out.
You can say straight face.
Yeah, that's right. So I guess my take on the whole industry is that it's never been easier to start a site and to gather some users. There are lots of different platforms now, and of course there's like generational differences. You know, not very many young people go to Facebook, you know, and I think Instagram seems to me to be, you know, going to be bigger than Facebook eventually and will take over. I think the move towards video content seems to be unchanging. Like that's just a march going forward. But big publishers seem to be suffering a lot more than smaller and longer tail publishers. When you look at the largest sites on the internet that are run by big corporations, basically they're losing market share to this sort of enormous number of people who are real specialists in their field, who are putting their own content online, who are making the best quality content. And of course, that's why Google is in the fantastic position they're in, is because they're the best way of finding that content. The content discovery is great, whereas apps, it's difficult, isn't it? Trying to find any app that is perfect for you, and you have to download it, and then you go, oof, don't like it, and then you leave. Whereas you can go to a website and go, nope, that's not what I want, and then you go back. So with 5G and things getting faster, I would say, yeah, the internet's in good shape.
Yeah. And so I guess that kind of leads on to maybe another question of like the macro trends that you're seeing within the publisher landscape. And is that the rise of the longer tail, or is it, the sort of larger businesses will adjust? And because obviously, say like newspapers and those large sort of publishers, like are they a part of the Ezoic customer base and a growing part of it for the problem you solve?
Yeah, I mean, we have some very large publishers that use the system, but the problem there is like the internal bureaucracy that goes with running what is effectively a website, right? So you can have 1,000 people who are working on a website, like, I don't know, the Telegraph would be a good example. You have content producers, you have SEO experts, you have AdOps people, you have DevOps, who are the people who take care of all the servers and caching and the health of the site, and obviously all the content producers, and then commercial interests, sort of advertorials and so on. And you have all of these people working effectively in these little silos. Now, the main problem with that is, the science is that everything dilutes the value of other things. So if you change the menu, for example, trying to improve the time on site or the page views per visit and make the site easier to use, you could inadvertently affect the monetization of the page. Or if you were to change the theme or the background or the fonts or the titles or anything like that. So these things are, they're sort of, they're competing goal sets. And so we tackle this very much from sort of first principles, which are, we have automated multivariate testing. So not just A versus B, because that's really hard to extrapolate. If I have version A and that wins versus version B, and I show everyone version A, that result won't necessarily translate from desktop to mobile, for example, or from United States to Israel, let's say, whatever it might be. So multivariate testing is the only way to do it. And then to use actual user behavior rather than samples and extrapolation to change the site so that not everyone sees the same thing. That requires quite a lot of faith in a system, which effectively is going to show different versions of the same site to different people. Now, Facebook have been doing this for years. My version of Facebook won't be the same as yours. LinkedIn does the same. Google actually does the same thing. So my search results are very subtly different because I'm in the UK versus the United States. And so that's why those huge organizations have done really well. But what I'm saying is, like, the middle tier maybe don't have the chops to be able to do that kind of personalization. It's very difficult to then get buy-in from 80 people to say, let's do this. So we are very much growing most quickly in the sort of small, medium-sized publisher base, where they might have 1 million visits a month rather than 50 million or 100 million, something like that. But I've seen, it does work. The thing is that Google, my opinion of what Google is trying to encourage in terms of online publishing is search satisfaction. So all of your listeners will be thinking about, well, how do I get up the rankings? Well, getting up the rankings is actually quite good if you have really good content that's better than your competitors. Now, how does Google work that out? I mean, everyone's got their opinion, but bounces back to Google and looking for the same thing. So a bounce back to Google is a really negative sign. And so, Google's very much pushing towards, how do we make the web easier to use? And anything that gets in the way of the web being easier to use, then they will punish sites and push them down the rankings. So site speed, these core web vital things that that we were talking about just before we came on. These are all ways that Google are pushing publishers to do a better job of looking after the user. So if you look after the user, you will go up the rankings eventually.
Yeah. So we mentioned this core Web Vitals just before we started. Just for the benefit of everyone listening, could you kind of expand on that? Like, what is it? How is it going to affect publishers? And are there ways to prepare for it? Because there's some big changes just generally this year, isn't there? I mean, Apple iOS privacy thing, which is the scan work, which we've been having a lot of conversations about at Everflow, helping people prepare for that.
Yeah.
What's this new change that Google is proposing or headlining that they're going to implement?
Yeah, I guess that we'll come back to the death of cookies or whatever you want to call it. But Core Web Vitals is a type of metric that Google gives every site a score, and it's made up of a number of sort of sub scores. Some that don't get drawn in too much by all of the names, because it took us quite a while to even work them out. So things like the first contentful paint and cumulative layout shift. And what they're trying to do is to get everyone to look at how does a site perform when you are a genuine user coming to the page. So everybody who owns an online property, you can go to your Search Console, which used to be called Google's Webmaster Tools. Go to your Search Console, and then you'll see, Google's promoting it quite heavily. How are you doing on your core Web Vitals? And it will give you a very simple score, which is how many URLs are in the green and how many are in the red. And what it's done, it's based not on a sample, it's based on real users for the previous 28 days. And it's, are they hitting good scores? So does the page load quickly? Does the content of the page load quickly? And does it move around after the page is loaded? So,
and are these kind of condensed sort of KPIs published by Google? Can people search?
They are. If you go to Google Site Speed scores, it's called Google Lighthouse as well. If you open Chrome and go to Tools, and you open the developer tools, you can go to the Lighthouse. It's called Lighthouse scoring, and it will just give you a score. And it gives you a score on desktop, and it gives you a score on mobile. And then it shows you a list of all the sort of transgressions, all the things that you have done wrong, which could be you haven't converted your images to the next-gen formats, which are good for loading quickly on mobile. You haven't resized them for the size of the page. It could be that you've got too many scripts that are blocking other scripts from loading. So things like ads, for example, that's a really good example. Is if you've got an ad loading on a page, if you don't know the size of the ad that's going to arrive, what can happen is, I think everyone's done it. You go to a page, it loads, you start reading it, scrolling slowly downwards, and then the whole thing refreshes, and you end up jumping and going, where the hell was I? And it's because the ads have come in later into how the page loads, and that's called a cumulative layout shift. And Google gives you a score for the percentage of the page that moved, and how many and what it was. And if you score poorly on that because of your ad provider, then you can very much damage that core Web Vitals score. So that's something that we're working on at the moment. It's actually quite tough. Another, for example, might be unused CSS. So if you've got styling items that are for desktop that are loading on your mobile version, that's just wasted processor power. And our system will look through and say, okay, we don't need these desktop ones, we'll remove those. But it does it before the page loads. And that's the benefit of working server side before the page loads than browser client side. And these are things that everybody kind of needs to know about, but it takes such a lot of sort of computer science knowledge and actual time that really need automated tools, and that's what we've been working on. So we've got 40 engineers working on just that.
Yeah, yeah. So what are the kind of most common questions that publishers have when they want to use Ezoic? Because presumably it's to some degree like I'm scared of a lack of control. What's going to happen to my website? Are these standard questions that gets asked? Or
I would say so. I mean, we've been through a few iterations of the various products that we have, so it's not just having ads in the right place at the the right size and the right price, that's just a whole element of how to use Ad Manager really well, is to price all your ads based on the user session rather than on just one ad, because all ads dilute each other. That's a good example. That I would say the number one concern or the question that people have are, how do I get in and how do I get out, I guess. So we say to people, well, come in, there's no contract, you can try it at any time. And we've very much put this together as if it was me buying it, because I hate the idea of being tied in. I don't like giving credit cards when I'm going for a free trial. I always worry about, I'm so busy, I'll just forget about that. And then I've got some charge that I pick up on, 6 months later. So we don't ask for credit cards. It's at will use. So turn it on, turn it off at any time. And it's only when people can partition traffic. So you can say, okay, I'm going to try it. 50% of my traffic, or even 10% of my traffic, is going to go through to the Ezoic system. And then let's compare that like for like with what I'm doing on the rest of my traffic. And then we have a scientific control group, which we can compare it to by device per day. And then all of the decision making is scientific and not done on some sort of salesperson telling you what you're going to get. So I think a lot of it is trust, because it's sort of like, well, it sounds too good to be true. And that's probably our biggest hurdle. It's like this piece of machine learning runs on my site and it makes me more money. There's got to be a catch. And we're saying, well, it's just that most publishers have been doing this for a long time, and they've been sold a pup once or twice before. And so nothing that we do is manual. No, it's all automated, and they don't believe that either. So I would say trust is probably the number one thing.
Yeah, and I guess given that your client base may be on the kind of smaller side, a lot of these people are just experts in producing content, right? Rather than
they are
understanding, how cookieless tracking works, or direct linking, or any of this stuff, and so that's where kind of they can come to you for that. But also, as we said, like, the landscape is constantly changing, isn't it? I mean, what you were doing 10 years ago as a publisher, and am I right that, like, to start with, Ezoic, when you kind of first started, you were buying sort of evergreen content sites where they were sites with a lot of longevity, things that don't necessarily change. And so those sites by their nature are sort of quite static to some degree, right? Yeah,
that's right. And, we treated those sites that we bought quite mercilessly. They formed the basis of our sort of experimentation. So we have these 400 sites, and we've tried all sorts of things on them. We had this product called Layout Tester, which is still, really good, and it's still used quite extensively. It tries different themes to see what works best. Most sites, when you go to them, particularly on mobile, what is the difference between one theme and another? Not much. It's really just sort of the menu and the background colors and the fonts, maybe. There's not that much. So things like a left menu, or whether you have the word menu or the hamburger, the sort of three horizontal lines, those are things that can be experimented with and give you just a slight edge, and just sort of get a little bit more, make something just slightly easier. And Google notices, and so you do go up in the rankings. So I would say we've learned quite a lot from running our own sites, but more so now from getting feedback from publishers that have used the system for a long time. So last couple of weeks, I've been talking to publishers who have been around using Ezoic, getting some feedback, because we've just finished all our sort of strategy for the year, what we're building, what we're getting all the engineers to work on. You know, we have well over 100 engineers now, which is a lot, and we're quite ambitious. I would say, yeah, they're happy just to say, you deal with all of this stuff, and you know, I'm happy to. Some of these people are making, you know, $30,000 in a month from ads, you know, $50,000 in a month. Well, it could be one guy or girl. You know, it's an interesting niche, but there are tens, hundreds of thousands of people producing content and getting paid for it, which is how the internet works.
Yeah, which is great, right? That's why we're enjoying this call, and that's why we've had tech for so long. So you mentioned like planning for 2021 and rolling that out. What are the kind of big themes for Ezoic for this year and the foreseeable future?
Yeah, so usability improvements. So the core web vitals is a really big push, getting that done straight away. Lots of making things easier. So the scale problem, working on that. We've actually had a lot of influencers, stroke educators, people who they quite a lot of them actually sell courses. You know, how to start an informational site and make money from it, and have it take over from your salary within 2 years. That's what one of them does. They pay an upfront fee and they stick with them for 2 years as a cohort and tell them, like, this is what you've got to do, this is what you've got to do. And they have partnered with us. So that's how we get, you know, I think one day we had one of these guys suggest us, and we had 800 signups from just his group, which is kind of phenomenal for us to deal with. And good job, they can all do it themselves. But a lot of these guys are starting from scratch, so they need a lot of help and resources. So we've produced a lot of online resources, videos, and educational tools. Content production, so also SEO, testing different tags. So, you know, you have a title, which, you know, you might have a landing page that gets you 10% of your visits. It has a title. That title appears in Google search rankings. What if you change the wording of that title? Does your ranking go up? Does it go down? Does the click-through from that title to your page increase or decrease? And so what we've done is we pull in all the data from Search Console, and then we do automated multivariate testing of different tag titles in your header. So things like that, really hard to do on your own. That, I would say, sometimes we build things and nobody uses it. That is probably one of the biggest ones that we've produced that people love. And video is the last one, being able to make videos from text content. That's something that we're looking at and having it integrate with our video player.
So, sorry, being able to make video from text content. Can you just?
Yeah,
I'm
still in strategy mode, I think.
Right.
It's the idea is that you know, I think very long term, are we getting to a point in the web where people are going to read less? Now, we know that you know, our kids, for example, spend a lot of time on YouTube. They'll look things up like that. Maybe our generation slightly less will.
Well, I don't know. I mean, if I want to figure out how to do something, I'll always watch a video on it rather than.
Yeah, that's right. And I think there is that sort of move from Google moving from a search engine to an answer engine, and that being able to give Google the opportunity to give you the content or you the visitor. So we have a video player that we built last year, and people are uploading their own videos, and being able to rank for your own video content for your site rather than put it on YouTube gives you the opportunity to rank in Google video search as well as in your textual search, if you like. So it sort of stands to reason that if you already rank for, I don't know, how to change the oil on a VW brand, blah blah blah, how would you go from your stage 1 written content, stage 2 written content to your video, where you just combine the two on the same page, and then you're much more likely to rank for the video searches as well as. And I think that this is an example of a strategic decision for a publisher, is to maybe stop doing so much work on all the written stuff and more work on video. And so what we want to do is give them tools to help them do that, or identify which pages would rank,
Yeah, and are you doing the same for voice searches? And have you seen?
Yeah, we had a long discussion about that one. Voice search isn't there yet, and it's also really difficult to understand how you can make money from it as a publisher. So, the world of podcasting has really taken off. The answer engine business is still sort of fragmented. So, you've got Alexa, is it Cortana on Windows, and Siri, and these other sort of voice search. You can tag up your pages for, it's called schema markup. I think that's something that's on our roadmap to help people. But that's more like a 3 to 5 year strategic move, whereas I think video is more pressing. And I think also content creation, like if you have better content, you will rank above your competitors. Like that is the number one thing.
Yeah.
All this other stuff about accessibility and usability and speed, that's all fixable, it's all doable, but it's not going to make you number one if your content is worse than number 2.
Yeah.
That's what Google is, they're the best at.
Fixated on. Yeah. And I guess the rise of video, and obviously that kind of plugs into 5G, and how there's huge efforts by all the infrastructures to make the internet faster and make the internet more accessible for the billion odd people that are still without the internet. Like what trends do you see sort of internationally? I mean, are you able to sort of say, well, broadly, like the US is maybe a couple of years ahead in terms of video generation and content, and then it's coming to Europe? What kind of trends could you highlight for people that are maybe in some of these other geos to think about which way the wave's coming, as it were?
Yeah, I would always look to the US internet or the English language internet to see which way the wind's going to blow in those new markets. We call them new markets, but really not the core market of the internet. I mean, the English language seems to be, well, maybe next to Chinese, let's say, seems to be number one. I'm quite close to that because I run a French and German and Italian team from London, so I do see it. And the internet in each of those regions, I would say Germany is much more closely aligned to the sort of English internet or US internet. I would say Italy and the French internet is different. I think it's easier to game Google's search engine. I've definitely seen that. So sharp SEO practices that would just never work. They form an opportunity for publishers who want to get up the rankings quickly, and you can do it in French, you can do it in Italian, much easier than you can do it in those other languages.
And sorry to interrupt you, John, but would you recommend, let's say if I'm a content producer, I'm producing content of something that I know about, is a fast track, get that site translated into the various different languages and start ranking there? Is that a quick expansion policy, or is that fraught with all the ambiguity of translation and things like this?
It's tough. If you don't speak those languages, you have to rely on your translators. And there are some really good translation tools. One that we all use is called DeepL, the letter L. DeepL.com is actually, I think, better than Google Translate, but it still misses the mark very slightly.
Yeah.
So I do wonder whether Google can tell where the publisher is. And I do wonder about that. Sites that have moved from the United States to the UK when they've been sold, for example. I've seen a change in their rankings in google.co.uk versus google.com. And there are so many theories about how you can do better in search rankings. I would say that the sort of cardinal rule has got to be the uniqueness and the intent of the user. So let's say you rank for a keyword, the user comes to that page. Do they get what they want from that page? Now, when you're trying to rank against other sites, go and read those landing pages. Go and see, what do the ones above you, why are they ranking above you? Ask yourself and be honest. And maybe your page needs a refresh. Maybe it needs a better sized image. Maybe it needs more original content adding. Maybe you're just not hitting the spot. And somehow, because people vote with their mice and with their thumbs, the users are telling Google, I don't like that as much as I like this. That intro is too long.
Yeah.
I think you picked up on something really interesting just then, is that things are changing, and 10 years is a lifetime. In this last year, look at how everything's changed because of the lockdown. I think the idea of accessing medical help via video, the idea of doing your weekly supermarket shopping remotely.
Yeah.
I think the idea of buying everything and getting it delivered, all of that's taken a huge leap forward, just mandatorily, it's just happened. So what is it? 16% of the United States economy was online before, and now it's something like 30%. So it's accelerated 10 years in a year.
Yeah, we've seen. So for those that don't know, Everflow is like a tracking and attribution platform. We help anyone that wants to run, manage, scale, optimize an affiliate or influencer program. So this could be e-commerce people that are looking to broaden out what they offer to influencers and connect with Shopify and things like this. And we do a lot of things that you mentioned, automation of landing pages and things like this to help people make a success of their program, right? Because everything is very competitive. And what we've seen, definitely the big trends that we've seen are nearly 50% of our business in the last 7 or 8 months has been e-commerce based. And the rise of B2B has been quite interesting because people with complex sales cycles can't meet people at conferences and have that very long sort of, getting to know you and the trust and all the rest of it. So we're starting to see more and more sort of B2B people starting to use Everflow so that they can track the true sort of ROI of their various channels, whether it's, first touch or last touch attribution. So it's changing all the time, isn't it?
It really is. I was looking at the various acquisitions that some of the big tech businesses have made. And I think Microsoft's acquisition of LinkedIn last year, it was 26 billion, I think it was.
A few years ago now of LinkedIn, wasn't it?
What's that?
A few years ago now, wasn't it?
It's a few years ago. But I was just thinking the ROI for them since the pandemic hit, how much the traffic on LinkedIn must have gone up, how much the utility of it has become much more important. It's like the world's internet sort of directory of professionals, isn't it? It really is.
I personally think that LinkedIn's got the challenge of being seen as something like the Facebook that people do during work hours.
I've got to say, I agree. Some of the posts, you're like, oh, don't pull on my heartstrings. I'm at work. Please don't raise money for your charity. That's terrible thing to say.
Obviously, I'm kind of aware of time, but
sure.
for like publishers that are there, like obviously you've seen the gamut of publishers from very small people that are struggling to make it work to small guys that are earning big figures and right the way up to the big publishers. What would you say like your golden rules for publishers? Anyone that's either starting publishing or someone that's looking to get to the next scale, what's some of your sort of pearls of wisdom that you can dispense from up above on
I wouldn't say up above, alongside maybe. I think the first one is doubt your preconceptions. So a lot of publishers, and particularly blog writers, people who write about a specific subject, they're writing with an audience in mind, and that audience is like a projection in their mind, and they almost feel like, well, I know all my audience, they're like me. And of course, what you've got to do is you've got to go on the data. How are they responding to what you've done, rather than sort of have a fixed idea of who they are? Because a lot of websites, they get a lot of their traffic from brand new users who never come back. And so it's that it's trying to view everything through the lens of data and going on that, rather than on your sort of gut feel. And it's the same for things like design, particularly people who spend hours and hours and hours worrying about the design of their site. Honestly, it doesn't make that much difference. What you want to do is make sure that it's nice and fast and everything works. It's your content is number one. And I think whether you're selling any product, we talked about intent earlier, from an upstream keyword to a landing page. Look at your site as a collection of landing pages. Do not spend time on your homepage. So that's a real classic as well. When people go and look at a site, they'll look at the homepage and think that everyone's going there. Whereas actually, if they go to Google, they can see all of the different landing pages that the users come to. And quite often, they might just be looking at that one page and then leaving. So that's the way that the internet is accessed. And I would say that would be my number one thing, is to just try and be dispassionate, try and look at it almost like a computer, because that's what it is. It's just input and output. You're giving them content, and they're giving you an output, which is their reaction to the content. It's not necessarily an emotional thing. So it sounds a bit cold, but
well, you can imagine how difficult that is, because for people, particularly, the sheer investment that people into produce content takes a lot of time, doesn't it? So people feel very wedded to, I presume, their site and how that looks and so on. Great. Thanks for your time, John. Always good to catch up. Are there any other things that you want to mention about Ezoic, or just generally sort of points for listeners that they may?
No, I mean, I'll make a quick plea for the independent internet. I think the idea of walled gardens and places where you produce content that you sort of lose your ownership to it, I think that long term is going to change. I think people are looking now to not necessarily have their content, given to some big organization that's then going to use it to make money out of it. I think that people want to produce their own content and have it themselves and benefit from it. And I think that that's good for the world, because the true experts are not people who are employed to write something. They're the ones who want to write because they know a lot about it. And I think that that's the way that the internet will get better long term.
Couldn't end on a nicer point.
There we go. Right. Slightly preachy, but hey.
No, definitely. John, always a pleasure to talk to you. Nice to see you. And we will definitely speak soon. And thanks again for your time.
Thanks for having me on. Cheers.
Cheers.